It is the 1st of December and I'm obviously in full Christmas mode. To be fair, I've been trying to get into the Christmas mode since about October, and I can't deny that like the movies that I've watched this year to try and get me into the Christmas spirit have been underwhelming at best. So I'm not feeling as festive as I could be, but I'm hoping that once we get the tree up, all of that jazz, it will come. So to try and make myself feel a bit more Christmassy, I have brought out the full works, the full sparkles. And since it's the 1st of December, that means that November has finished and we can do a November wrap-up. And I have 4 books to talk to you about today. 4. That is so exciting because in October I read 2 books, so even though 4 is not the best, it's like double what I read in October, so you know what, if we keep going at this rate it will be 8 in December and then I'll be happy. So the first book that I finished in November was Hangs a Man by Shirley Jackson, which I read for our Briarrose book club. It was a bit overdue, it was our September pick, but I ended up finishing it in November, and we've already had our live show discussion about this book, which was wonderful. I loved it. I loved talking about this book because even though it is slim and short and sweet, there is a lot in there, and it's not short and sweet, to be honest. It's actually quite dense and haunting. Don't know why I said that. So Hangs a Man follows Natalie Waite, who's a 17-year-old girl who leaves her sort of suburban, domestic family set up to go to university, and very quickly she becomes a little bit unmoored and a little bit untethered. She doesn't feel like she fits into the university life. She feels quite alienated, and she starts slowly sort of having these delusions and dissociations, and it's a very strange and unnerving book. And slowly things start to happen where you start to question whether Natalie is actually experiencing these things or whether it is just her overactive imagination. And I know that Shirley Jackson is most famous probably for The Haunting of Hill House or We Have Always Lived in the Castle, but I'm very, very glad that I started with Hangs a Man because it was such a good entry point for me personally, because I love the coming of age genre, and this very much felt coming of age to me. The whole novel is a liminal space, is a place where Natalie has physically left something behind, her family home, her family life, and arrives at university and has not found herself, doesn't feel like she's come into herself yet. And I wrote my whole dissertation on liminal spaces and coming of age in cinema, so this theme is something that really, really gels with me, this idea of feeling completely lost and unmoored, and that you've left something and you're bereft but you haven't found the next thing yet, and you're just in this sort of limbo basically. And as we can expect, Shirley Jackson describes this in such vivid detail, and you really feel like you're going through it with Natalie. And even though it's a short book, it literally took me like 2 and a bit months to read because I just felt like I had to keep taking breaks, and not because it was, harrowing or graphic or anything like that, but just because you feel things with Natalie and the language is so rich that you do feel like you're like wading through dark, murky water, and that you do need to sort of reread paragraphs or take it in a little bit more and actually think, oh, is that real? Is that, what has she mentioned there? Is that out of place? Is that something strange? But it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. It was so, so rewarding. And like I said, this was meant to be the book club pick for September, so I was reading it at that time where the weather just starts to turn a little bit chilly, and it was just such a good way to usher in the sort of winter, autumny weather, and it was just a very strange, unnerving book that I'm sure I will be coming back to. And if you want to hear anything more about it, or you've already read it and want to sort of leave your thoughts on it, you can go to our live discussion that we did. There's a lot we unpacked, I think, in that discussion. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one, and I'm very much looking forward to checking out Shirley Jackson's other work. The next book that I finished in November was Leave the World Behind by Ruben Alam, so I was really trying to carry on the sort of creepy, unnerving theme, because I don't read a lot of spooky books in October, so I was trying to rectify that a little bit in November. So in this book we follow a white family who is sort of leaving the city at the beginning of the novel, and they've rented out a house in the countryside to sort of stay there for a holiday. They're like going for like a mini getaway type situation, and they're just going outside of New York, so it's not like rural, but it's like in the country. The house like doesn't have any neighbouring houses, it's like backed up by forest, it's very sort of isolated, and they're going there to just like relax, recharge. They're going to leave the world behind. ha 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 ha. And on their first night they've bought groceries, they've put the kids to bed, they've settled in, and the parents, I think Amanda and Clay, I think that's her names, are sort of settling in for their first night, you know, enjoying their vacation, when suddenly there's a very unexpected knock at the door. And because the house is so isolated, this immediately puts them on edge. They're like, who's at the door? No one knows that we're here, what's going on? And when they answer the door, it is a black couple who say that they are the owners of the house, they are the ones who rented the house to this family, and all of the power has gone out, they were just driving home, and that they need to crash here for the night until they understand what's going on. But because the power's out, they can't check the news, they can't check internet, they can't like verify their story, so immediately this sets up this sort of tense situation where the family who's renting the house feel kind of obligated to let this couple in because they're the owners, it's their house. But the tension sort of comes from this underlying doubt of this couple's story, like are they really the members of the house? And obviously that is sort of racially motivated, like subconsciously this couple don't believe that this lavish house in the countryside could be owned by a black couple. So there's a lot going on, and that tension builds because the couple comes in, they stay the night, and then the next day all four of them are trying to figure out what has happened to the world, what is going on. And strange things keep happening, like strange animals keep migrating through the back garden. There's a very loud noise that occurs that cracks the glass, and no one knows what it is. They think, is it a bomb? Is this a terrorist thing? Like, no one actually knows what's happening. And the whole novel just puts you in that place of unease, and you're sort of waiting inevitably for an explanation, right? What has happened to the world? And you don't get it. Spoiler alert, but I never thought we would, and that's kind of frustrating thing about this book. Before going in, I knew the concept of it because I'd read about it and I, you know, heard people reviewing it, and I thought the concept sounded really, really interesting and I wanted to find out more. But then having read it, I don't really know any more than I did before I read it, if that makes sense. I think it's definitely one that people would read to be in that sort of atmosphere, but it's not one that you read for like plot and explanation, because after the initial concept you think, ooh, that sounds interesting, I want to read more. It doesn't really give you any more. So for me it was very much a mixed bag because I was a little bit frustrated by the ending, but it was no doubt a world that I was interested in being in. It was well written, the characters felt real and interesting to me, and it's always that sort of moral dilemma of like, what would you do in this situation? And there's no real answer for that, and it definitely prompts those questions. I think it would be one that would be good to discuss with people, but in terms of like a full reading experience I was left a little bit unsatisfied, and therefore it was a bit of a mixed bag for me. And the next book that I finished in November was All Our Hidden Gifts by Caroline O'Donoghue, and this is one that I read for our November pick for Briar's Book Club, so hopefully we're getting back on track a little bit now. We had a little blip in September, October, but hopefully we're back on track now, and I've read this for our November discussion, which should be in the next week or so. So obviously I won't talk too much about it here because we've yet to do our live show, but I really enjoyed it, basically. I knew I would. It's YA, it's about witchy business and tarot, it's at a girls' school and it follows these two best friends, so I knew it was definitely going to be up my street. So in this book we follow Maeve, who is your average teenager who goes to a girls' school, and she is, you know, filling out a detention one day, and she's helping clean out this chokey, which is named after the chokey Matilda, but this sort of basement room in her school, she's helping clear it out because, you know, it's punishment, she's in detention. And as she's clearing, she finds this old deck of tarot cards, and she just feels this pull towards them, like the beautiful art, and she just hasn't seen anything like that before. So when she gets home, she begins researching and sort of falls into the world of tarot, and then starts giving tarot readings to the girls at school. And this very quickly becomes a phenomenon, like all the girls want readings, and Maeve very quickly becomes quite drained with this and wants to find out more about, you know, how to read the cards correctly, like what can she do to sort of respond, if that makes sense. So while all the girls are buzzing and raving around Maeve and she can't really catch her breath, and she's really desperately trying to keep up with her studies, keep up with giving all these tarot readings, and it's taking quite an emotional toll on her. But while that's going on, there is one girl who definitely does not want one of Maeve's tarot readings, and that is Lily. So Lily and Maeve used to be best friends, and at the beginning of the novel we realise that they used to be best friends, but that they are not anymore, and it's not entirely clear why. We just know that Maeve sort of ditched Lily to be with the more popular girls, but we get the sense that there's a bit more to it than that, and there's a lot of resentment between these two girls. So one day in class, Maeve is pressured to give Lily a tarot reading, and everyone's sort of cheering and egging her on, and Lily comes over to the table, like reluctantly accepts the tarot being read. And during this reading, a very mysterious card shows up called the Housekeeper, which Maeve hasn't been able to find an explanation for anywhere. She doesn't know what it means. It's a very sort of disturbing card. It's drawn in like a quite horrific way, and she can't find any explanations for it, and she tells her that she doesn't know what it means, and Lily gets quite freaked out by this because Lily really believes in all of this magical, mystical stuff. And then they have an argument, and Lily storms out of the classroom, and then the next Monday at school she doesn't come back. And then when Lily's been missing for a few days, the police show up and chaos ensues. And naturally the girls start to believe that what happened to Lily's disappearance, was a result of something that Maeve did, and Maeve desperately begins the journey of trying to get her back. And I had a really fun time with it. I really enjoyed learning more about tarot. I really enjoyed the sort of side plot that this book takes, which is more into like activism and LGBT rights, which I was not expecting at all, but it was really, really interesting, and something that I want to talk more about in our discussion. And I really thought the characters were really, you know, compelling and real. I loved Maeve as a protagonist, and she has a huge host of siblings that we don't see that much of, but it very much gave me the vibe of like family. And when I looked this on Goodreads, I saw that this is book 1 of a trilogy, I believe, so I will definitely be picking up the next 2 books in this series, and I can't wait to talk about it in our live show, which you should come and watch. Go and follow us on Twitter at Byros Book Club, and all the details will be there. And the last book that I read in November was This Much Is True by Miriam Margolyes, Queen Miriam Margolyes. And it almost feels like I'm taking credit for something that I didn't read, like holding up this chunky book when I didn't actually read it. I listened to an audiobook, but audiobooks are reading, it's fine. We move. And if you're going to read this book, I really do recommend listening to an audio, because I find with memoirs especially, it's just so rewarding to hear the voice of the person tell their own story, especially when it's someone who's known to be quite funny, like Miriam, or I don't know, Amy Poehler. I listened to her audiobook like years ago, because just the timing and the delivery of the stories is just impeccable. And obviously I knew Miriam from her very raunchy Graham Norton interviews, but also for playing Professor Sprout in the Harry Potter films, and Nurse in Romeo and Juliet. But it was so interesting to hear about her full layered career and all of the different things that she's done. She's done extensive voice work, and her accents in the audiobook are amazing. Another reason why you should listen to an audiobook, because her repertoire of accents is just incredible. And so whenever she's telling a story where people have different regional accents, she's doing them all, and it's amazing. She's obviously had a very extensive career in stage, and it was really interesting hearing about all of that. Also interesting hearing that she doesn't even like the Harry Potter films, and she's never seen them because she fell asleep during the premieres, because it's just not her thing. She doesn't like fantasy. And it was also really sweet hearing more about her experience on set of Romeo and Juliet, because she said that Claire Danes, who plays Juliet, was like really quite in love with Leonardo DiCaprio, and everybody knew it, and he wasn't very nice to her, and sort of like it was very obviously like rebuffing her advances, and it was quite sad. And I was just like, oh no. But she's also worked with Martin Scorsese, so it was really cool hearing about that as well, because obviously he's a very iconic director, and Miriam was in The Age of Innocence, which I think is one of his like lesser loved films, but I'm very interested to watch it now. But yeah, as with any career that is this broad and this long and this successful, there are bound to be so many fun stories and little tidbits of information that I was just so interested to read about. And obviously it's not just about the glitz and glam of her being an actress, it's about her own personal life, you know, growing up Jewish and growing up with her parents and then coming out to them and that not going very well, and that was quite a touching chapter, her opening up about that. And she's been with her partner Heather for like 50 years, but she also opens up about the time that she cheated on Heather, and then going to therapy afterwards to sort of fix their relationship, and that it worked, and they're still together now. But yeah, it was quite sweet. In the introduction of the book, she writes about how, you know, this idea came about, and like she wanted to track down her memories for years, and that she's very interested in genealogy, so she was wanted to sort of document her family and her experiences for a long time. And her partner Heather was saying to her, like, this can't just be like one of your Graham Norton interviews, Miriam, it can't just be smut, you have to write something real. And I feel like that's definitely what she's done. She's really shared a part of herself that I don't think you get to see. Like, obviously we love hearing the raunchy stories on Graham Norton, and she's very iconic for all of those, and those are in here. But you'll see a different side to her that you haven't seen yet, which is a very tender, loving, warm person that I think we all knew was there, but it's just very nice to like hear about and read about. And yeah, it was just a really, really engaging and fun look at like an incredible life. And obviously she's met so many different people, and there were so many times in the book where she would talk about someone that she met at the very beginning of her career, someone that she met 30 years ago, and then she would say, and I kept in touch with them until their death in blah. And that sentence was in this book so many times, and I was just thinking like, oh, she's such a sweet person. Like, she's met so many people and she's just got such a curiosity and thirst to know about people and to befriend people, and she mentions that in the book. She talks about how she's always been so curious to the point of being nosy, and people will just tell her to go away all the time, and that her contact list on her phone is 11,000 people, because she's just so chatty and wants to get to know everybody. So I think that's just like testament to what kind of person that she is, and I think like I came away from reading this like wanting to be a little bit more like that, a little bit more curious and open to the world, and then maybe I'll have some of Miriam's like fun experiences that she details in this book. So very much recommend if you're already a fan of Miriam or you don't know who she is. It's just a fun, interesting look at a very unique and wonderful person, and I would recommend it. So those are all the books that I managed to read in November. Again, like I said, 4 are not the flashiest on BookTube, but it's double what I read in October, which was only 2, so we're heading in the right direction, and maybe we'll get a few more in December. We have to, if I'm going to hit my bloody Goodreads goal, which is lowered anyway, so does it matter? Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you soon with another one soon. Bye.